Hey everyone, how's it going? It's Russell here, and there's just been a huge vote on the Canada Recovery Benefit on whether or not this benefit will be slashed or if it will continue on at its current rate. Now, this vote just happened, and I found something in here that was totally unpredicted and something that I'm really surprised that the media is not talking about. Who knows, maybe they're just not following this stuff as closely. But in this video, we're going to talk about what the context of this vote was, as well as what exactly happened in there that I found so incredibly shocking. But before we do, make sure to check out the links in the description where you can open up investing accounts and start taking your wealth into your own hands. All right, now let's dive into this. I'm going to provide a little bit of context of what's been going on and what the heck just happened. If you've been following the channel for the past little while, you probably already know that this Bill C-30, well, it's the Budget Implementation Act, and it's set to make a whole bunch of changes here in Canada. Included in is the CRB changes, and they're seeking to do a couple things, giving them the ability to extend the benefit potentially, but also cut the benefit down from $500 per week to $300 per week. Now, currently at its current stage, it was just sent to the Finance Committee, where they go over clause by clause by clause, sort of talking about this bill and talking about if they want to make any amendments or changes to this. And there's one section of this bill that it was looking like they were going to make some amendments about this $300, or the reduction to $300. It's right in here at the amount of payment right here. We're not going to go over the exact wording of it because we've talked about it before on the channel, but essentially this is the section of the bill that lowers it from $500 per week or $1,000 every 2-week period down to only $600 per 2-week period. Now, since this is such a mammoth bill, it's taken them a huge amount of time to get to this section of the bill where they specifically talk about, clause by clause, the CRB changes. Now, based on previous statements from members of parliament who are members of this finance committee, it was looking like the Bloc Québécois and the NDP would be sort of putting forward an amendment to this section to say, hey, we're not through the pandemic yet. We shouldn't be slashing these benefits as of yet. We should be able to keep them at the current rate until we get employment up. And so when they got to this section, the NDP and the Bloc Québécois did bring very, very similar amendments to this committee saying, hey, we shouldn't make these changes. Let me show you exactly what they said as their amendment.
The Bloc Québécois amendment is word for word the same as what's going to be put forward by the NDP. So I think Mr. Julian will be able to add to what I have to say here. The argument is that only people who can't find a job continue to receive this benefit. So we feel that it's not necessary to reduce the financial coverage, the monetary coverage offered under the program. We are requesting that it remain at $500.
Yes, the two amendments are very similar. And the reality is we can't be slashing benefits from people who, at this point, still are unable to find work, should not see a massive slashing of their benefits. I think it's very clear. If we're listening to the witnesses and listening to the concerns that people have raised about the slashing of these benefits, why would we deny people the wherewithal to put food on the table or keep a roof over their head by slashing benefits at this time? It's no time to do a victory lap. It's no time to say, okay, we can wrap up supports. As we've heard consistently and repeatedly at this committee, it is important to extend those. This government provided $750 billion in liquidity supports to the big banks. Let us not be mean-spirited with people that desperately need these supports, and let's not slash supports at this critical point, the third wave of the pandemic.
So we see Gabrielle Sainte-Marie of the Bloc Québécois and Peter Julian of the NDP both pushing for this benefit to stay at its current level, saying, hey, based on all of the witnesses that we've had come in here to the Finance Committee telling us, hey, we shouldn't cut these benefits, well, we should listen to them and not cut these benefits. Now, let me show you what Wayne Easter, the Liberal head of this Finance Committee, does. It's a little bit of a political loophole that allows him to shut down essentially whatever he wants if it has to do with money. Now, I want to point out what he said here because it's not the first time I've heard it. I'm inside of this Finance Committee when they were talking about employment insurance months ago before they extended that. Well, they also used the same sort of trick here. So listen to this and then I'll give you my take on it.
The effect would be to revert back to the existing text of the Canada Recovery Benefits Act, which provides for a payment of $500. Since the bill provides for a decrease of these payments, this amendment, if adopted, would result in increasing payments from the Consolidated Revenue Fund. The amendment as proposed is therefore inadmissible as it requires a royal recommendation. Since it imposes a new charge in the public treasury, and I think as Mr. Julian and Mr. Sainte-Marie mentioned, this ruling applies to both the BQ7 and NDP 18 as well. So the amendment is inadmissible under the rules.
Okay, so let me break that down into plain English so you can understand what this guy just said. Essentially, what he's saying here is the fact that this change would have the government paying more than the current bill provides for out of the Consolidated Revenue Fund, essentially a pool of taxpayer dollars. They say, well, you technically can't make that amendment because anytime it has to do with money and using taxpayer money, we need a royal recommendation, something that can only come from the Liberal government. So since the Liberals don't want to provide that royal recommendation, they essentially can't put this amendment through in the first place. Essentially, in my eyes, it's just using a political loophole for your individual party's gain. That's kind of what's happening here. But the NDP and the Bloc Québécois do have an opportunity to sort of try to go against this ruling from the chair of the committee, in which case they'd trigger a vote among committee members, which would then determine whether or not they're actually able to put the amendment forward. And of course, Peter Julian and Gabrielle Sainte-Marie, the people who were bringing these amendments, well, they said, heck yeah, we're gonna try to trigger a vote against this. And that's exactly what they did. And I want to show you what the vote results were right now. So here are all the members of the Finance Committee. First, I want to play you what this challenge sounded like from Peter Julian. Some harsh words used here, but then we're going to listen to the vote, and I'll do check marks and X's to determine what they actually voted.
It's an outrage, quite frankly. So yes, I will challenge your ruling on that basis. A government that actually cared about the people that are being affected by COVID would not be doing this.
Okay, so that's the challenge from Peter Julian saying, hey, if the government actually cared and had people's backs like they constantly say they do, well, they wouldn't be making this change. Now let's listen in on the final vote to see if this amendment can even go through in the first place. So remember here, a yes vote means that they're voting in favor of the decision made by the chair to not allow this amendment to go through. So yes means they're voting for benefits to be cut, and no means that they're voting the inverse of that. Now let's listen in on exactly how this vote went down.
The question is, shall the decision of the chair be sustained? Ms. Derowitz?
Yes.
Mr. Fragiscatos?
Yes.
Mr. Fraser?
Yes.
Madame Koutarkis?
Oui.
Mr. McLeod?
Yes.
Mr. Falk?
Yes.
Mr. Fast?
Yes.
Ms. Jansen?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Monsieur Sainte-Marie?
No.
Mr. Julian?
No.
Yeas pour 9, nays contre 2.
So it's a 9-2 vote here. So those are the results on this vote. And one thing that I found particularly interesting that I think you might be a little bit upset about, especially if you're somebody who's ever been in support of UBI, is the vote of Julie Zerowicz. Let me explain why. Now, Julie Zerowicz, the Liberal MP, has been largely applauded by proponents of a guaranteed basic income or a universal basic income because she was the first Liberal MP to bring in a bill suggesting that we move forward in that direction. Now, at the exact time of this date where she voted for these benefits to be cut and this amendment not to go through, on the very same day, June 3rd, she put out this tweet saying, hey, guaranteed basic income gives everyone equal access to opportunity. I introduced that bill to give us all a chance to exceed and to enable Canadians and Canada itself to achieve its potential. Ask your MP to support this UBI bill or GBI, guaranteed basic income bill that she's put forward. So on the very same day that she's pushing her guaranteed basic income bill, well, she seems like she's voting along party lines for these benefits to be cut, which is just a little bit interesting to me. So what does this all mean? Well, essentially it means there's not going to be any changes or amendments made to this Bill C-30 when it comes to the CRB. Now, just today, the Finance Committee sent this report to the House of Commons saying, hey, we only want to change a couple things and they're not CRB related. You can see them here, a couple changes, but they're not at all related to the CRB. It's a very big bill and they did make only this amount of changes in all of the bill. That's all of the changes that they were able to make via amendment in the bill, and they reported that to the House of Commons. So next step, this Finance Committee, well, they sent this report to the House of Commons, and now at third reading of this bill in the House of Commons, they're going to debate this bill further, and then there will be a vote, and that will be the final vote in the House of Commons on this bill. Now, it's going to be a super, super interesting third reading because clearly the Bloc Québécois and the NDP want some changes made in this bill. And as of the past little while, the Liberal government has been largely largely propped up by the NDPs, right? If the NDPs vote against this bill and don't want it to go through when they get to that third reading, well, it could trigger an election if the Conservatives also don't support this bill going through. So that upcoming vote in the House of Commons, well, that's going to be a true indicator of where the NDP and the Bloc Québécois really stand on these issues, right? They can push for certain things in committee, but if they don't then sort of back up the things they were pushing for at third reading, well, then it's kind of clear that they're just kind of propping up the Liberal government, allowing whatever they want to get passed through because they're saying, hey, we don't want an election right now. We're in the middle of a pandemic. So if you haven't already done so, make sure to subscribe to the channel because I'm going to keep you updated on this as soon as the House of Commons sees this newly updated bill with the amendments that were and weren't made. And let me know down in the comments, what do you think of all of this? I thought it was so crazy to watch this process and to see how the inner workings of all this actually happened, especially a little bit of the hypocrisy from some of the Liberals there on the vote, especially if they're in support of larger benefits going out to a larger base of people. It seems a little bit odd that they would vote this way when it comes to this bill. But let me know what you think down there in the comments. And of course, make sure to check out the links in the description where you can start taking your financial future into your own hands. So important these days because we really can't rely on any government support these days. So you got to take your finances into your own hands. Check out the links in the description. And with all that said, thank you so much for watching, everybody. I really hope this video helped you out at least a little bit, and I'll see you next time. This channel is supported by viewers like you. Thanks, channel members.